It wasn't loud, but it carried well enough to echo off the polish of the wooden walls in Courtroom 4, like a sharp crack in still air. That simple motion of opening a folder and watching as one sheet slid free shouldn't have felt so dangerous. Yet, in that instant, it was as if some trap had been sprung. The whole courtroom stilled. Even the faint scratching of a pen somewhere in the gallery paused mid-stroke. At the defense table, Robyn Brown sat tense in her chair. The brown leather creaked beneath her, but her palms were slick with perspiration. She had her hands crossed tightly in her lap, knuckles white, as if she could keep herself from shattering by willpower alone. Her rich brown hair was drawn back smoothly over her shoulders, a few strands hanging loose to caress her cheek. But she didn't dare shift to correct them. Every fiber of her being was intent on remaining motionless. Across the room, Judge Marianne Keller, who was a woman of around 60, with piercing blue eyes and an unwavering demeanor, sat observing from the bench. She had adjudicated hundreds of cases, some more sizzling than others, but she had a sixth sense when it came to tension, and currently the room was heavy with it. In the front row of the gallery, Detective Samuel Ortiz leaned forward slightly. He was the chief investigator in the case, a man with a square jaw, neatly trimmed beard, and eyes that appeared to monitor every movement like a hawk. Ortiz didn't utter a word. Not yet. His work was complete for the moment, but if Robyn blinked in a way that betrayed something, he would catch it. Seated beside him was Lisa Moretti, a local reporter with a reputation for turning courtroom tales into front-page headlines. Her pen rested poised over her pad, eager to catch every phrase. Lisa had been covering the sister wives' family for several years, but this, Robyn in a courtroom, accused and cornered, was bigger than anything she'd ever written. A few rows ahead, Christine Brown and Janelle Brown, Robyn's former sister wives, sat 2 seats apart. Neither of them said a word. Christine's lips were pursed into a thin line, and Janelle's eyes were staring toward the evidence table. The tension of all those years of family dynamics was etched into their features. But now there was something else too, a bizarre combination of vindication and unease. The photograph lay face down for a moment, almost as if it were aware of its own power. Prosecutor Daniel Reeves stepped forward, his polished shoes clicking against the hardwood. Reeves was a tall man in his early 40s, with an unshakable confidence and a knack for delivering blows in court with surgical precision. He placed a deliberate hand on the photograph, his other hand resting casually in his pocket. "Your Honor," he declared, his voice calm but filled with intention. "This is new evidence that flips everything about this case on its head." Michael Porter, Robyn's lawyer, shifted uncomfortably at her side. Porter was a defense attorney, with graying hair, and the sort of bloodshot eyes that had been up too late too many times. He was good. Very good. But even he hadn't been ready for this. "We weren't told this," Porter replied hastily, standing up. His tone was that of a man attempting to sound masterful, but sensing the ground giving way under him. "This is against procedure. We have a right to." The judge held up his hand, forestalling him. "Mr. Porter, you will have your say. For the moment, let the prosecution continue." Porter reclined in his chair, jaw clenched. He leaned towards Robyn, speaking so softly only she could hear. "Don't react. Whatever is on that paper, don't give them an inch." But Robyn's heart was already racing. A slowing drumbeat thud thud thud, that pulsed in her ears. She did not need to glimpse the image to recognize what it was. She had been told this day could be a possibility, had practiced in her imagination how she would remain calm. But in safe imagination, the moment never quite felt so crushing. She looked towards the gallery. On the extreme left sat Mary Jacobs, an old acquaintance, or, more accurately, an old would-have-been acquaintance, who had previously formed part of Robyn's tight-knit group before everything had disintegrated. Mary was sitting with a face Robyn couldn't decipher. Was it pity, smugness, some odd silent victory? 2 rows in back of her, Colin Hart, a paparazzo, was half out of his seat leaning forward in anticipation of that winning angle when the picture was unveiled. Scandal photographs were his life's blood. the raw, unflattering instant that sold covers. Robyn focused her attention back on the table, forcing herself to take slow, even breaths. Reeves at last picked up the photo, holding it between his fingers for the shortest moment before setting it down softly, almost ritually, on the table before the judge. The way it slapped against the wood, quietly, in the silence traveled like another shot. The judge stretched out and touched it slowly, her eyes narrowing as she absorbed whatever the photo was filled with. She didn't say anything for several long seconds, simply looked at the photograph in silence. Porter moved beside Robyn once more, his knee jerking beneath the table. "Just relax," he whispered. Impossible to relax. In Robyn's head, the memory associated with that photo unwound like a spool of film she couldn't turn off. She could still recall the scent of the air that day, the queasy sensation in her stomach, the instant decision to stand in that place, with that individual, and the idea, foolish, naive, that no one would ever care. From the corner of her eye, she saw Christine's arms fold across her chest. Chanel leaned in to whisper something in Christine's ear. The motion was small, but it made Robyn's throat tighten. Reeves cleared his throat. "Your Honor, with your permission, I'd like to submit this into evidence for the record." The judge gave a slow nod. "You may proceed." Somewhere in the back, a chair creaked as someone shifted uncomfortably. Lisa Moretti's pen began moving again, the rapid scratching of ink filling the silence. Colin adjusted his camera lens. Reeves faced the jury box. "Ladies and gentlemen," he started, "you're going to be shown a photograph that speaks for itself, one that the defense would rather you not look at. And when you do see it, I think you'll realize why this case has suddenly become very serious." Robyn's stomach twisted. She had been in enough tense situations in her life to know when something was about to detonate, and this was one of those moments. Porter leaned closer again, his voice low but firm. "When they show it, don't flinch. Look at it like it means nothing to you. We'll challenge it." But Robyn wasn't sure she could, because the truth was, the photograph did mean something. It spelled trouble. It meant that someone had dug deeper than she'd ever imagined, and it meant that the secret she'd been keeping so quietly may not remain buried long. The hum of the air conditioner was the only noise that filled the silence before the next words fell. The photo, now officially designated as Exhibit 17, rested in a transparent evidence sleeve on the judge's desk, an unspoken deadly presence in the room. Robyn's eyes continued to drift toward it, even though she warned herself not to. Seeing it reminded her of leaning over the edge of a cliff. Her thoughts started to spin backward through the months that had culminated in this. It had begun quietly, a contract disagreement, something she had believed would be resolved with a few telephone calls, and perhaps one court hearing. At that point, she was still trying her best to keep the public world of politics at arm's length from her private struggles, but trouble tended to get around. It started with the anonymous letters, typewritten, not signed, showing up at her doorstep. Initially they were cryptic: "You can't hide forever. We know what you did." She had shown them to her husband, Cody Brown, who waved them off as crank mail from deranged fans. Then came the phone calls. Always late at night, always with a pause before the voice on the other end spoke. Sometimes it was a man, sometimes a woman, but the words were always similar. "We're going to make sure everyone knows." She'd attempted to brush it off, to think it was all an empty threat, but then someone had sent one grainy picture to her inbox. The subject line was only a single word. "Remember?" Robyn looked at that picture for what seemed like a long time. It was the same image now in front of the judge. Only then, when she looked back, had it been smaller, blurrier. And she had reassured herself. It might be a coincidence, that the angle, the light, the backdrop could all be deceiving. But the discomfort in her stomach had grown ever since. It was weeks later before the media picked up on the feud. The headlines twisted the story, piling lie on top of lie until the facts no longer counted for much. One morning, she'd emerged from her front door to be greeted by two reporters standing in her driveway. Lisa Moretti, notebook tucked under her arm, shining bright eyes full of questions. And Kyle Denton, a freelance cameraman who turned making a living into an art form of catching folks off their guard. Kyle's camera lens had tracked her every move to her car, even when she tried to pretend they weren't there. And then the betrayals. An old family friend, Darren Blake, had appeared on a late-night television talk show and implied that Robyn had been meeting with the wrong sort of people. Another friend from the past, Mary Jacobs, had given an exclusive interview to a tabloid. She had thought they were at their worst just before it happened. But someone else kept fueling the flames. Now in Courtroom 4, Robyn heard distant whispers from the crowd. She didn't need to turn her face to be aware that they were for her. Phrases drifted just close enough that she heard snippets. "That's her. Did you hear about the Ed? I knew she was trouble." Detective Ortiz, who remained in the front row, shared a knowing look with Prosecutor Reeves. They both realized it was more than a legal war now. It was a public spectacle. Her lawyer, Michael Porter, leaned toward her again, speaking in a voice only she could hear. "We've been through worse surprises," he said, though the crease between his eyebrows betrayed his worry. "Stay focused on me, not them." But she couldn't help it. She glanced over to see the look on Christine Brown and Janelle Brown's faces. Their eyes met Christine's for a millisecond. And Robyn thought, looking back now, that Christine knew exactly what that picture contained. Janelle wouldn't even look at her. She would just stare at the front, arms crossed over, like she'd already decided which side she believed. The bailiff moved forward, a broad-shouldered, tall man named Officer Grant, who had been keeping order all morning. His voice rang out as he spoke to the room. "The court will now permit the prosecution to introduce the new evidence before the jury." A wave of expectation swept through the crowd. Pens were poised in readiness. Cameras were adjusted. Somewhere, Colin Hart grumbled under his breath, "This is going to sell." Robyn's breath caught. She still could feel the same fear she'd experienced the day the initial email arrived. And under that fear, something else. Because the truth was, the photo wasn't the ugliest part of it. There were other pieces, other moments, that might come up if someone continued to dig. And she knew, in the back of her mind, that whoever had leaked this likely wasn't done yet. The mood in Courtroom 4 changed. It wasn't tense anymore. It was charged, like the atmosphere before a storm. Prosecutor Daniel Reeves shifted his stance, allowing the pause to grow until every individual in the room was leaning on the second. He didn't hurry, this was his platform. And he knew how to wield it. "Your Honor," Reeves started, his tone as slick as it was calculated. "This picture was taken precisely 21 days prior to the event in question. The date is confirmed, the setting established, and the caliber of company that Mrs. Brown kept during the course of that day is of real interest to this court." He moved toward the evidence projector, the heels of his shoes striking the wooden floor. Detective Ortiz tracked his movement with the unblinking gaze of a man who already had a sense of what was about to happen. Lisa Moretti, who was 2 rows back from him, held her pen poised an inch over her notebook, ready to jot down the first response. Reeves raised the photo in its protective sleeve. Robyn could even from her chair see the edges of the picture, the faint cast of shapes she knew all too intimately. Her heart pounded more quickly. "Let the record show," Reeves said, "that this photograph was acquired legally and has been authenticated by a certified forensic analyst." Judge Keller nodded brusquely. "Go on." With measured care, Reeves slipped the photo underneath the projector lens. The soft click of the machine, and instantly the picture covered the massive screen suspended on the courtroom wall. A general gasp circulated through the room. It was no ordinary photograph. It was that day. There stood Robyn Brown, suspended in time, clad in a tight-fitting navy windbreaker, and a silver necklace around her neck. Her hair was loose and in a careless braid, her smile tenuous but present. And beside her stood Jonas Vance. Jonas was no stranger to the police or the headlines. His name had been associated with half a dozen fraud investigations in the last 10 years. But he'd always stayed one step ahead of official charges. The mere appearance of him caused the gallery to tingle with whispered rumors. The setting was unambiguous. The high, vaulted windows and white marble pillars of the Westmont Hotel, a venue frequently employed for discreet high-stakes meetings. Reeves allowed the murmurs to build for a moment before continuing. This photograph puts Mrs. Brown in the presence of Mr. Jonas Vance 3 weeks prior to the events in this case, which were alleged to have occurred. We have reason to believe that this was not a coincidence. In fact, Michael Porter leapt to his feet. Objection. The prosecution is trying to attribute speculative motives to a photo without giving the entire picture. Judge Keller raised her hand. Overruled, temporarily. Go ahead, Mr. Reeves, but only to what can be substantiated. Reeves nodded, a small contented gesture. Of course, Your Honor. He addressed the jury once more, his tone dropping slightly, the sort that makes one lean forward. This encounter occurred in an area that was used to conducting private negotiations. There is no indication of what was said, but the mere association speaks volumes. In the front row, Christine Brown's lips curled into the faintest smirk. Janelle kept her expression neutral, though her eyes flickered toward Robyn. The cameras clicked rapidly. Colin Hart snapping photo after photo of Robyn's reaction, though she did her best to keep her face unreadable. Porter leaned toward her and whispered through clenched teeth, "Don't let them bait you. We'll dismantle this." But Robyn's mind was spinning. She remembered that day, with perfect clarity, the heavy double doors of the hotel, the cool draft in the lobby, the feel of the chair she'd sat in across from Jonas. She remembered the conversation, and the part of it she had sworn no one would ever hear. Reeves, seeing the courtroom's appetite for more, moved toward the jury. "This picture is not only a photo," he slowly spoke. "It is a fragment of an even larger picture. And when we assemble those fragments, the truth will be irrefutable." At the rear, a man shattered the hush, with a spoken whisper that traveled further than he'd meant. "She's done for." Officer Grant gave the man a warning glance. But the harm was done, the words lingered in the air, toxic and heavy. The judge rapped her gavel once. Order in the court. Order was, however, an illusion now. The picture had opened the case right up in the public's imagination. And Robyn knew, if she didn't beat it, this single picture would ruin her utterly. The picture continued to radiate on the large screen, immobile as a stare. It wasn't evidence anymore. It was the focal point of the entire room, drawing every pair of eyes, nourishing every hushed rumor. Judge Keller spoke first. "Mr. Porter, does the defense have any response to the introduction of this evidence?" Michael Porter stood, fastening his suit coat. His tone was firm, but Robyn could detect the strain in his jaw. "Your Honor, the picture the prosecution has just shown is nothing by itself. A photograph is an instant in time, without the complete context. It is a shadow, not reality." Reeves cocked his head to one side, as if entertained. "If the defense is so adamant about context, maybe we should hear it straight from Mrs. Brown." Porter's gaze narrowed. "We'll get to that." He nodded once at Robyn. Barely more than a twitch. The judge shifted her glasses. "Mrs. Brown, please come forward." Robyn's heart constricted. Her legs were heavy as she stood. The courtroom was longer now, each step towards the witness stand ringing in her ears. She could sense the weight of dozens of eyes following her. Reporters, witnesses, Christine, Janelle, Ortiz, Reeves. Officer Grant pushed the little wooden gate open for her. She passed by him, her heels clicking against the floor in a cadence that was too harsh in the quiet room. She went up to the stand and held out her right hand for the oath. The clerk's tone was formal, almost clinical. "Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?" "I do," Robyn replied, her tone softer than she had meant. She sat, settling the microphone in front of her. Porter came forward first. His face relaxed even for him, an intentional gesture for the jury's sake. "Mrs. Brown," he started out, "the prosecution presented to the court a photo of you and Mr. Jonas Vance. Can you explain to the court, in your words, why you were there that day?" Robyn breathed deeply, conscious of each camera directed in her direction. "I was invited to the Westmont Hotel for what I thought was a meeting with regard to a charitable foundation. I didn't know Mr. Vance would be attending until I got there. We chatted for a few moments, but nothing illegal, nothing pertaining to this case was ever discussed." Porter nodded. "And did you know Mr. Vance prior to that meeting?" No, Robyn replied in a firm voice. I had never seen him in my life before that day. Porter shot the jury a look, allowing her words to sink in. Thank you, Mrs. Brown. He addressed Reeves. Your witness. Reeves approached the stand slowly. His eyes locked on her. Mrs. Brown, he asked, you said this was a surprise encounter. Is that right? Yes? And yet he went on. You were seen taking a picture with Mr. Vance. You look at ease. Even smiling. It was being polite. Robyn replied coolly. Sometimes you smile because people expect you to, not because you're at ease. Reeves took a few paces and then stopped. Do you think this jury is going to accept that you, an elected official with an extremely publicized life, just happened to be at a recognized meeting spot for high-profile negotiations, with an under-the-scope man, completely by chance? Porter objection. Argumentative. Judge Keller. Sustained. Mr. Reeves. Rephrase. Reeves nodded. But the pale smile never wavered from his lips. Mrs. Brown. Did you have any business with Mr. Vance during or after that meeting? No? Were you sent any emails, calls, or messages from him in the weeks that followed? Robyn hesitated. 1 second too long. That was all Reeves needed. That hesitation, he said facing the jury, is indicative. Porter leapt up. Objection. Sustained. The judge ordered crisply. The jury will ignore that last remark by the prosecution. The harm was done, however. Reeves took a step forward, speaking softly enough that the room leaned in. Mrs. Brown, are you absolutely sure that there's nothing at all from that meeting that you'd care to disclose now, before more evidence is revealed? Robyn looked back at him. I have told you all I know. Reeves gazed at her for a long time, then at last backed away. No further questions for now. The judge released her from the witness stand. But as Robyn made her way back to the defense table, she could sense the doubt sinking over the courtroom like mist. Christine's eyes tracked her every step. Janelle's face didn't shift, but her hands were folded more tightly than ever before. Detective Ortiz remained motionless, his expression uninterpretable. And Robyn understood the crossfire wasn't finished. It was just getting started. The gavel came down once. A loud crack that appeared to shatter the intangible thread suspending the courtroom in held breath. Court will recess for 20 minutes. Announced Judge Keller, her voice abrupt. No suggestion of what she was thinking. When we resume, we will hear further motions. The bailiff's voice immediately after. All rise. Everyone remained standing, as the judge descended from the bench, and vanished behind the side door. The instant she was out of sight, the strict formality of the courtroom relaxed like a coiled spring releasing itself. The gallery erupted into soft murmurs. Reporters hissed into their phones, their voices merging into an urgent buzz. Colin Hart lowered his camera just long enough to replace the memory card, his gaze flicking between Robyn and anyone who might come for her. Michael Porter turned to Robyn. The instant the judge was out of earshot. We have one avenue left. But it's thin, he whispered. If we can establish your whereabouts prior to and subsequent to that meeting, we can dilute the impact of the photo. Robyn's hands remained clasped in her lap, but her fingers curled into her flesh. It won't matter, she whispered. Porter scowled. What do you mean it won't matter? She glanced to the photo still on the evidence table, its shiny surface reflecting the overhead light. Because that photo is only half a story, she explained softly. Porter moved in closer. Half? Robyn hesitated, glancing towards the other end of the gallery where Christine and Janelle were sitting. Christine was engaged in conversation with Lisa Moretti now, her face austerely expressionless, her movements controlled. Janelle's eyes remained riveted on Robyn, steady, unwavering. Robyn whispered almost below her breath. If they locate the rest, she did not continue. She did not need to. Across the room, Reeves sat engrossed in discussion with Detective Ortiz. The detective's expression was somber, his head nods slow. Periodically, Reeves looked Robyn's way, and it was impossible not to sense the weight of those looks. The recess had transformed the room into a chessboard. all the players stealthily making moves, some openly visible, others covert. Porter stiffened. "We'll manage," he declared, less to her, and more to himself. "You just keep the line until I can get the schedule solidified." But Robyn wasn't certain the line could be kept. Not if the wrong individual opened their mouth. Not if the correct evidence found its way into the incorrect hands. She stood up from her chair, having to get up and move around, to breathe. Stepping into the aisle, Officer Grant followed automatically. His duty was to keep anyone from getting too close at recess time. Still, despite his shadowing her, she felt vulnerable. Whispers trailed behind as she walked towards the hallway. She appeared nervous. "You saw her stop. There's more to this, I swear." She elbowed the heavy wooden door wide open into the hallway, where the sound of the courtroom receded. The air out here seemed cooler, but with the faint ring of sounds from adjacent rooms. Robyn paused, eyes shut, focusing herself. She had 20 minutes. 20 minutes. Before the tempest erupted again. Footsteps coming from behind. She turned a fraction, anticipating Porter. It wasn't. It was Mary Jacobs, the former friend who had been in the gallery. Her eyes sparkled with something that wasn't quite malevolence, but wasn't kindness either. "You know," Mary said quietly, "I still have that envelope you sent me." Robyn's gut sank. "You wouldn't." Mary smiled weakly. "Wouldn't I?" Before Robyn could answer, a voice from down the hall called her name. She turned to see Porter waving her over. When she looked back, Mary was already walking away, her heels clicking against the tile, leaving a trail of unspoken threats in her wake. Robyn swallowed hard and forced herself to rejoin Porter. But deep down, she knew the truth. The trial wasn't the only battle she was fighting. Somewhere out there, fragments of her history were still in hiding. And when they emerged, no courtroom maneuver would be sufficient to extricate her. And as the bailiff's voice boomed out calling the court back into session, Robyn knew something else. The photograph was only the preliminary move. The game proper had yet to begin.